Hello friends, welcome back. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans, a great place for folks that love aviation and like knowing stuff, but aren't necessarily huge fans of studying. Well, if you hang around here long enough, you're going to wake up one day and be astonished with how much you've learned without even trying. And welcome, by the way, if you're joining us for the first time on behalf of our wonderful, awesome, amazing community. We're glad you finally made it. We're still chugging right along with our Rocking Out series, and this one is a bit of a surprise edition, not for me, but for all you guys, because I haven't mentioned it thus far in our itinerary, as I've been listing the flights that we're going to take. But we're out in southern Egypt, right along the Nile River, and we're going to check out the area around the city of Aswan. The rock, however, will be of a slightly different flavor because this one is man-made. But as far as man-made rocks go, it is massive. It's one of the biggest of its type ever found, actually. But despite its size, we are in an airplane, and we're going to be at least 3,000 feet away from the thing, so it's not real easy to spot, but it's just way too cool to pass up. And not only that, this area is so packed full of history and other incredible stuff to see that I think this trip is totally worth it. The plane I've selected is one of my favorite sightseers that we've got in our hangar. It's the JSX-2 by a developer called YSIM, and I think it was their first plane they ever made. And I don't know if they've made any others, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. And we haven't had this baby out in a while. I'm pretty sure the last trip that we took with this one was out in West Virginia, but it's cool. And it's pretty basic, which means very, very low performance drag, and there's no photogrammetry out here, although most of it looks pretty good. So we can turn the graphics way up. Okay, so this is pretty easy to start up. I didn't even make a checklist because I seem to remember it not being too bad. All right, that's for the gears there. So turn the master on, fuel pump on, avionics on, engine on. And I can't remember what that does, but last time I forgot to turn it on and the engine wouldn't start. So that's that. And then all you have to do is push that little detent pen and bring the throttle up to the first position, and it should start running up. And it is, that's good. So I believe this is the stock avionics that come with this, but you can switch it to a GSX, or G3X, which I just like a little bit more because it's got that nice map on it. So we'll shut that so it's not super, super loud. And it gets going pretty quick. So let's go ahead and look at the Google map just so I can show you where we are and where we're going. So here's Egypt. You probably recognize that there, Sinai Peninsula. And here's the big reservoir that was made by the dams that we're going to be looking at here, which is one of the incredible landmarks that we've got. And here's Aswan. So we're taking off up here at an airport right next to Dara. I think that's how you say that. And we're going to come up this way just a little bit, then come around this side so we can see the Nile out of the left side of the plane. Come all the way down here and then kind of zigzag a little bit because we've got some different stuff to see on both sides of the river. And there's two big dams down here, actually. This one's the really, really big one up here. There's another smaller one down here. And then we'll cruise around this way, and then the airport... Man, I can't believe they're not marked on here. It's probably right about here. So I think the whole trip will probably be less than 20 minutes in the air. And it's going to be pretty cool. All right, so let's just get a few things configured. Let's get this set to GPS because we will fly this on autopilot. And that should be good. And then we'll get our transponder going once we get to the end of the runway. All right, so let's go ahead and get moving. See if we can avoid this guy. All right, so the taxiway is like directly behind us, so I'm going to have to do a big U-turn here. Parking brake off. And this thing, man, once it gets enough throttle to get going, just launches itself. So you got to do a little bit of brake riding. Not a problem. This is the live weather. We got about a 5-knot headwind, and we're going to be landing the same direction that we're taking off at our arrival airport. But on my test flight, it got up to a good brisk 25-knot tailwind. So I hope we don't move too fast because we got a lot of stuff to talk about. All right, as far as add-ons go, there's only one for this flight. It's for our destination airport of Aswan International. I don't know if you say Aswan or Aswan. I might say both, just to cover all my bases. And it is freeware. So that will be linked in the video description along with this exact flight plan so you can take it just as we are. The only caveat is that you need to know how to use little NavMap. And if you don't, I have created a few short tutorials, and I mean real short, like 10 minutes long, on our channel's how-to playlist that will get you up to snuff a little NavMap in just a matter of minutes. This runway is kind of long, so we're going to have to drive all the way down to get to the other end, but that's okay. We'll take all the runway we can get in case we have an engine failure or something. So the arrival airport add-on wasn't a total overhaul, which I don't mind because the smaller data package means we can keep our graphics settings maxed out, which I did. But it cleaned up all the only thing I turned down was the windshield reflection effects because they were so intense in this that it was actually blocking some of the stuff, you know, all the reflections from all the dash and everything. You couldn't see some of the stuff outside, so I turned that off. But everything else looks pretty good. The airport, though, they cleaned up. They put some static vehicles, which look pretty neat. Fixed up some of the runway markings, the PAPIs, the taxiway signs. All in all, because it's also small, definitely worth putting in there in my opinion. So this airport we're leaving from is the Dara Airport, Hotel Echo 2 Tree, which has two massive 10,000-foot runways. The one to the east, which would be over there, the one we're not taking, is just a little bit wider. This one's 100 feet wide, I think that one's 120 feet wide. And I have no idea why this place is out here. there's a tiny little parking area. I couldn't see any signs of an old terminal building, but at the end of this runway, which you can't see in the sim, they have a bunch of reinforced hangars, like buried, but it doesn't look like they're being used for anything. So maybe this was originally for military, but there aren't that many of those either. And I didn't see any signs of big structures that might have been torn down, so I don't know what the deal is. And once we get up in the air, if we look down to our left, we'll see the city of Dara on this side of the Nile. Once we circle back to the south, we'll see it over the Nile. And it's not very big. From what I could gather, I think their big claim to fame is having the largest camel market in Egypt, which is going to be a little bit too far away for us to see, but it doesn't look like much anyway. All right, I'm just going to turn around here. So I've got the throttle at idle. Look how fast we're going. 40 knots. All right, so let's just slow down and turn around, because we'll be driving forever here. And there's nothing to see at the other end anyway. All right, before we get going, I want to mention that the polls are open for our quarterly flight plan competition. To view the 3 flights in the running, just click on the community tab on our YouTube channel page. It'll be the first post at the top, and you can vote in the same spot. And I linked all the videos if you want to watch them for the first time or rewatch them. So we've got an Australian flight, our recent Oman flight, and then one I really pulled out of the archives, our Whistler Mountain flight up in Canada. All right, come on, just turn a little bit further, a little bit further. And to show my appreciation to all you guys, I've decided to give away everything that YouTube has paid me so far, which is a little over 50. I'll just probably round it down to 50 bucks in the form of a gift card to the sim vendor of your choice. And if you have some cool places to show off just before we get in the air here, all you have to do is hop on our Discord server and go to the Suggest a Flight section. Let me know the departure and arrival codes if you don't have a full flight plan to submit, and a few spots to explore along the way. And if it checks all the boxes for a postable flight, we'll get it up there. And anything submitted at this point, let me get our transponder set to altitude mode. That's good. And our cruise altitude is going to be 3,000 feet, so let's check our barrel real quick. And I don't know how you adjust the altitude in the sim, so I'm using my external hardware for that. So anything you post from this point on will be in next quarter's competition. We've already got a few things lined up. All right, 1 notch of flaps, and they start all the way down, so we need to bring those all the way up, and then we'll bring them down 1 notch. Landing lights, GPS is set. Flaps are set, barrel set, transponder set. We're good to go. And you cannot, I tried to adjust the vertical speed setting on this. You just have to cut the throttle back so much to even get it there, so I'm just going to let it do its thing until it gets up to 3,000, then it'll level out. And then coming down, to get it to come down at all, even if you set the vertical speed, you got to almost cut the throttle, or it just will not be able to get there. As I will demonstrate once we're doing that. Look how close you are to the ground on this thing. Alright. Positive rate of climb, gears up. And flaps up. Alright, so we'll hit the end of the runway, turn on the autopilot, and away we'll go. Everything looks pretty good out here. Obviously default scenery, but from way up high it looks very believable. Most of the terrain looks really good. Alright, autopilot on. Nav mode. Vertical speed mode. And I'm going to set it at 1,000 feet a minute, but that's not going to mean anything. It's going to do whatever it wants. Alright, let's just bring this back, way back on the throttle. We'll bring it down to about 90% for now. We can probably pull it back even a little bit more. Okay, in just a second we're going to see the first of our ancient landmarks. It's called the Temple of Kom Ombo. And it was constructed during the Ptolemaic dynasty around the 1st century BC, which actually makes it pretty young for this region. I think we're going to see it once we turn here. We'll have to wait till we come back around. And it's kind of unique in that it's a double temple dedicated to 2 different sets of gods. The main one was Sobek, the crocodile god of fertility, which is on the southern end of the complex, and the northern side is dedicated to the falcon god Horus. Alright, there it is right there. And this little thing here is a crocodile museum, which has a bunch of mummified crocodiles in it. So there's a temple right there, which looks pretty good. Real good for default scenery. That's pretty much what it looks like. But they have a bunch of those mummified crocodiles. They have some that are still wrapped up, some out on display, which is pretty cool. Way cooler than the temple, in my opinion. I'd definitely come out here to check that out. Look at this down here. Looks great. The trees look good. The little towns look good. Everything's really wonderful. Alright, so there's the airport, and this is Dara here. And then up here is... oh, no, there's the airport. Okay, so this is Dara here. There's our airport. I thought that was a strip there. And then back there is the town of Kom Ombo, which is a little bit bigger, but it didn't look like they had anything going on there either. So the camel trading place is right there. I'll show it to you on the end. The camel market. Not much to see. Just a big open pen for camels. So here's the Nile River. And at this point, we're about 500 miles directly south of where it flows into the Mediterranean and about 500 miles north of where it converges from the White Nile and the Blue Niles down at the city of Khartoum. And a lot of people think it may be the longest in the world at roughly 4,130 miles if you start at its furthest tributary. But there's a faction who thinks that the Amazon may have just eked it out. I guess maybe it depends on which tributary you start at and how dry it is when you're measuring it. And as you can imagine, the ancient civilizations venerated this thing for its life-giving wetness, thanking the gods literally, for it must have seemed like a miraculous provision. And back then, I don't think anyone realized it flowed through one of the rainiest regions in the planet, roughly 2,000 miles to the south. I don't think they ever figured out where it actually started until the 1800s. But around 6000 BC, enough people started clumping together in the Nile Delta near modern Cairo that the first large-scale permanent settlements in human history began to take shape. And a few millennia later, they tried their hand at a handful of construction projects so advanced they were still trying to figure out how they pulled that off. And I probably don't have to tell you what those were. And we'll see what may be the most ambitious of them all before we're done today, the Rock. So if you look to the right, you can tell there is some image overlap. Different photographs taken at different times of the year. But we'll get away from all that. But even despite that, I mean, the textures look amazing. Look at all that. Out there, it really looks good. Everything looks good. Aside from the desperately needed water used for agriculture up here, of equal importance was all the nutrient-dense mud that would wash through with the annual flood season. A benefit that has been all but vanquished with the construction of the Aswan High Dam, which is the larger of the two that we're going to see in a few minutes. After they completed that monster, all the silt settled in the big lake behind it, never making it through the last 500 miles or so, which has become a bit of a farming and ecological problem. But I suppose when they were gaming that out, they figured flooding was the bigger issue, which has now been remedied. Alright, so before we start doing our zigzagging to make sure we get the best viewing angles for everything, we're going to fly past New Aswan City up here on our left. And it's going to be this area right up here. So we're going to come around the side of this and then cut across this way. And then this is going to be Aswan up here. And then we'll see the dams and everything. And then we'll be done. And once we get to where we start turning, I need to remember to pull that throttle back. I want to be just above flap speed or we're going to zip past everything too fast. There was almost no information about New Aswan City online other than that they started building it in 1999. Literally one sentence on the wiki page. And you'll see that it appears to still be in the very early phases of construction here in the sim. But it looks way more built up than that on the satellite map nowadays. So they must be building it pretty fast. And it looks like one of those planned cities. Most of it here kind of looks like smaller residential places, but now all this whole area here is those multi-story project-looking places. Haven't really started building this up yet, but all this is completely filled up now. And they've even got a water park, which would have been really easy to see in the sim, but it's not done yet. It's done now, but it's not done in the sim. The bridge looks great. What a treat that is. Always love to see a well-done bridge. All right, after we come around here, we're just going to have non-stop stuff to talk about, so let's just make our turn here. I'll adjust our throttle. And away we'll go. So it's kind of funny. I mean, you can tell they've got really, really old, kind of dilapidated structures out here. And then downtown they got some pretty modern stuff, and this, of course, is very modern up here. But you can tell where they're going to start building everything. Down on this end, they got what looks like a big high school. Maybe starting to build one right there. That looks like the startings of a track. Yeah, these are all the low-rise stuff. Everything else they built out here, huge. It looks kind of like Tehran did. All those big, huge, tall buildings. I'll show you at the end. Here's where the water park is. So that's where they're starting to build that. Alright, so let's start pulling this throttle down. I'm going to take it down to 70%, just above it. That should get us pretty close to just above flap speed, which is where I want to try to be. I guess we can turn our landing lights off. This thing is just a bullet. But it slows down easily, which is nice, because some of these little jets don't like to slow down. But it's got some barn doors for flaps. Just pulling that throttle back some more. That should be good. We'll see how we do. Give it a couple more, just a touch there. Okay. So as we head into Aswan, I'll give you the short version of the history of this place, which is very, very deep. Archaeologists believe the first small settlements popped up around 7000 BC, growing into the southern frontier for Egypt over the next few millennia. And they originally called it Swinnet, which was the name of the goddess of childbirth. And that probably had something to do with no one caring to venture any further south to try to figure out where the Nile really started. So I guess they just told everyone that it started out here. Seriously, you don't need to go any further south. Trust us. It starts right here. This is it. That looks really, really good. You get down too close and it looks super defaultish, but from here it looks fantastic. 3,000 feet is just about perfect for this trip. Its massive stone cores became a valuable source of granite that was used to build temples and monuments from here all the way up to the northern coast, including the pyramids, which in itself is an astonishing feat of logistics. Moving that stuff 5,000 miles, 500 miles, 5,000 would really be impressive. About 500. It's a little longer than 500 miles. It's 500 straight from here, and the Nile winds around quite a bit. But the stone market was only one source of the early wealth for the city, and it sounds like there was quite a bit of wealth out here. People were also getting rich on the tolls that they were charging to boats that were going in both directions. Which I guess they weren't going too much further south if they thought this is where the Nile started. And just in case anyone got the wild idea that they tried to blow through the toll booth, they also had a significant military presence out here through its entire history, including today. As you're going to see here in just a second, we're going to see a bunch of... When I flew over these things the first time, I was like, what is that? And then when I zoomed in closer, not on the Google map, but on the little NavMap map for some reason, it said there's SAM missile sites, surface-to-air missile sites. So here's one of them up here, which you can see really well. And then this one here is also SAM sites, which actually look a little bit more like missile sites. They're just fainter. But this one here you can see really well. You can see all the pads and everything. Kind of reminds me of what we saw on that Israel flight down by the coast, by Tel Aviv. All right, let's see what we can spot here. So you see a little sand built up around the sides of it there? Looks kind of flat here. That's pretty cool, huh? And let's jump outside the plane so you can see the other one. There's the other one there, see it? Very cool. I don't know what they're defending it from. I guess maybe everybody. I don't think neighbors get along very well out here. So the Romans conquered Egypt around 30 BC, and if you know where to look, you can still see a lot of ancient stuff from those guys scattered around the city. In fact, in 2018, they found a big bust of Marcus Aurelius at that first temple we saw, the one with the crocodiles. But they've also found mummified remains of Roman citizens alongside much older Egyptians in some of the originally Egyptian tombs out here. But when in Egypt, right? All right, this hill up here we're going to see on our left, right on the other side of the river, is called Qibbet al-Hawa, and we'll barely be able to make out the ruins of some royal tombs as we circle around. Serenput the First was buried up here on the northern side, and then Serenput the Second was a little bit further to the south. All right, we're going to turn here in just a second and we'll get a better look at it. Oh man, the plane veered too far this way. All right, let me hop out of the plane again. That's it right there. I had to lean away from the mic to see it. The only thing about this plane is it likes to veer back and forth. You can't see much anyway. Last time we got a good view of it. That's all right. And those guys lived around 2000 BC, and they weren't the bigwigs though. They were too far from all the action up north. They were provincial monarchs. This thing here, which is rendered unbelievably accurately, is called St. Simeon Monastery. It was built in the 600s and dedicated to St. Simeon, who lived in the 4th century, and that guy has a pretty interesting story too, but we don't have time to go into that today. But they kept expanding it up through the 10th century, adding some high walls that gave it the appearance of a fortress that was never used for that. And its apex around the turn of the millennium, it was used by monks who were trying to evangelize people in this region. And this thing here is called the Tomb of Aga Khan, who died in 1957. I'd never heard of him, but apparently he was significant among Islamic circles of his time. But he was dead for 2 years before they built that, so he cooled his heels out in Switzerland for a couple years before they moved him back here. All right, so here's our big rock. It's called the Unfinished Obelisk, and this is it right here. You see it laying right there on the ground? That is the largest obelisk ever found anywhere. It's 30% larger than anything that was ever actually raised by the ancient Egyptians, and it weighs over 1,000 tons. But when they were in the process of digging it out, it cracked. See it laying right there? So they never pulled it out, leaving it for us to just marvel at today, which is awesome. But that was just too cool. The fact that you could actually see it in the sim, and that it's the biggest ever, awesome. Okay, right over here is the Nile Museum, and I thought, well, that must be really cool, but it's not. They've only got 250 artifacts in there. This is it right here. And I think it's more dedicated to the science of the river, which isn't all that interesting to me. But just to the north of it, right here, is an old Roman amphitheater. And then right here is a pyramid of some kind, which is flat, but I couldn't get any information about it. And this is the Low Dam, the Aswan Low Dam. They built that in 1902, and it really looks great if you fly over it from this side, but we'd have to just circle around and around to see that. But that was the largest masonry dam in the world when it was built. And when they flooded all this here, they submerged a bunch of old temples. One of them was this one here, which used to be at the bottom of this island right here, which is just the tip of it now. It's called the Temple of Philae. But they dismantled it and completely rebuilt it right there on that thing, which apparently was pretty heavily venerated by the ancients. They thought it might have been one of the purported burial places of the god of Osiris, or the god Osiris. But unfortunately, some Christians came along at some point and defaced everything. So they kind of ruined everything there was to look at. And this is the outline of an old Mamluk fort that was conquered by the Ottomans in the 1500s. And the Mamluks were a sultanate dynasty in Egypt for a while. Okay, so here comes the big dam, what we're really looking forward to seeing. Let's wait till we can get a good view of it. This one was completed in 1970, so about 70 years after the low one, and at 364 feet tall, it was the highest earthen dam in the world for a while. But we saw a much taller one than that on our trip out to Tajikistan, which was an awesome dam if you haven't seen that one. And again, the main reason they built this was to control flooding downstream. The little one didn't take care of that, and as devastating as that could be, subsequent years of drought were apparently even more destructive. But this took care of both those problems, since they can control both the flow and store up water for drier years now. The only downside, as I mentioned before, was the lack of nutrients that used to come with the flood mud. Okay, right here there is a huge monument called the Russian-Egyptian Friendship Monument, which just got modeled as a building of some kind. But they built that in '89, and Wikipedia said, or it wasn't Wikipedia, it was their own website, said it was 600 meters tall, but there's no way that's right. That's almost 2,000 feet. But it's really cool looking. It's a big observation tower. It's got 5 sides on it. I'll show that to you at the end. And it's too bad that it just didn't get modeled at all. And I don't know what that is. Looks like more SAM sites over there. This is another temple that they had to transport, and that's not what it really looks like in real life. That got the AI treatment. But that one's called the Temple of Kalabsha. And what's interesting about that one is that the Romans built it, but they dedicated it to a Nubian sun god, which was awfully nice of them. You know, for all those Romans doing all that land grabbing, they really did a nice job of catering to the local cultures as they rolled through. They did stuff like that all over Europe, too. Alright, so we're coming into Aswan International, and I'm going to go ahead and get down to 2,000 feet, which will be just right for our approach. And our throttle's probably already cut enough to do that, but I'm going to bring it all the way back to idle so we can come down. Look at that. Vertical speed indicator does not want to go. Let's see if it'll do it. Okay, it's going to hold there now. If you cut the throttle, it'll do it. Despite its name, this is actually not an international airport. It's only for domestic flights. And I don't know where the international terminal is around here. Maybe up at Luxor? That's 100 miles to the north, but there isn't much else that's out here. So the airport is right back there. We're going to do a big loop around, bring us in about 3 miles out, which will be fine for this little guy. They originally built this one in 1956, but upgraded it a few times in the 90s. And I'm not sure if there are 2 runways or 1 in real life. The one in the sim is landing us on the one on the left, but if you look at it on the Google Maps, it's got big X's on it, and the one on the right looks like it has runway markings on it. But I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. The one on the right also has a lot more skid marks on it, so I'm not sure what the correct one is. Okay, let's do an external shot as we bring the flaps down. Beautiful little plane. I really like this thing a lot. Really enjoy flying it, and great for sightseeing. Alright, we're coming up on 2,000 feet. And you can see the taxiway on this thing. So we're coming to the one on the left. There's no way we'll hit that one. But the next one is way down there, more than past the halfway point. So I'm going to come down the runway a bit before we bring her on in. And this thing doesn't like to stop once it gets to 2,000. I don't know if it's under a certain speed or what, it won't do it. So we're just going to take the autopilot off. Bring her on around, landing lights on, and we'll go ahead and give it a little throttle now. You know, I think that glider that we took out over the Rock of Gibraltar might be the only plane, like true blue airplane, not a helicopter, with a better field of view than this thing. I mean, this is unbelievable. Really nice and fun, and just so versatile. I can't remember how much it was. I've had it forever. Alright, you're going to see, probably because we're sitting so low versus a normal aircraft, see you later, pointer, that the PAPIs are going to indicate we're too high when it's not going to feel like we're too high, but I'm just guessing that we're probably, I mean, maybe 50 feet lower than we'd be in a jetliner. So we won't really rely on those. We'll just go by feel, and we're going to purposely come in high anyway. But this lake, or reservoir, I guess, what do you want to call it, is just massive. Really, really big. And I can't imagine the process of dismantling those temples and then trying to rebuild them. Talk about a jigsaw puzzle. Okay, a few announcements. Again, the voting has started for the flight plan recommendations. We will start pumping out our new ones. I think we're going to have 2 more rock flights at least. I was going to do Rio de Janeiro, but I think that deserves a full-on dedicated city tour flight. And full flaps. So we've got Mount Rushmore and then a spot in Kansas that was just recommended to us, which is really cool. They've got a little natural rock formation out there, and it's really little, but the flight out there, it's in the middle of Kansas, well, the northwestern corner of Kansas. But there's a bunch of big, like, gorges and ravines that I had never known were in Kansas, so we'll take a little flight out there because it's just a fun flight. And I had never known of those rock formations, so that's pretty cool. We'll take that one. And then we've got a recommended flight in the hopper for Sicily, and then someone just sent me a full-on flight plan for another spot that I haven't even checked out yet. So a lot of cool stuff to see. And I'll mention one more time that this flight plan, along with the link to our Discord server, if you want to suggest a flight, will be in the video description, along with our bookmark file for all the flights we've ever taken, if you want to be able to find them in little NavMap. And then also, of course, the one add-on that we have for this airport. Alright, I want to come down just a little bit further, or we're going to have to just taxi forever down the runway here. So we'll just flare for a while. We'll do a low flyby. Look how low this is. That's crazy. Alright, we'll come on down. Alright, once we get in here, I'm just going to kind of drive to the back so you can see the static stuff that was added, which is pretty neat. Better than a completely ghost town airport. Alright, this taxiway sign's just going to kind of pop up on our right, so I don't want to miss that. Let me come over here so I can see it better. Well, no, that thing's still in the way. It's... Nope, not that one. There really is a taxiway up here. I've turned on it before. Man, I could have come a lot farther down this runway. There's our sign. Okay. Alright, so we got some military vehicles over there. We got a whole bunch of coach buses. And you know, now that I'm thinking about Luxor, there is an add-on that does a bunch of the temples around there. They have quite a few, but you need to get really, really low and close to them, so that might be a good helicopter flight to go out there, because everyone's seen the stuff around Giza. But if you haven't seen the stuff around Luxor, they got a lot of neat stuff out there, and it's a really built-up city, too. That would be neat in photogrammetry. But we may cruise out there to check that out. So there's the military stuff over there to the left, and all the buses over there to the right. And, oh, we even got a little guy out there. I didn't see him before. All right, well, we won't leave him hanging. We'll go there and park in front of him. And then we'll look at a little NavMap real quick. And we'll be done with the unfinished obelisk, the dams, the temples. What a cool flight. Thank you so much to our member who recommended this. We took a group flight out there, and he had to show me where that thing was on the ground. That unfinished obelisk. I had trouble spotting it. Oh, he's got the little pushback thing. Alright, shh, be really quiet. He's got his headphones on. He might not know we're out here. I'm going to see if I can park it right on the end of that. So he can scoot me right up. Shh, 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 shh. Oh, I don't want to fight the throttle. I'm going to hit him. Alright, that's probably good enough. Okay, parking brake on. Flaps up. And we'll shut her down. And all you have to do to that is that. Okay, here's a little NavMap. If I can grab it. There we go. Alright. So look how big this lake is. Massive. So the nearest airports from where we landed, there's one down here, but there's not much of a city or anything around that. I mean, it's got a good-sized runway. And it doesn't say it's an international airport, but Luxor does, and that's up here, which isn't too far away. That's about 100 miles. That's got to be international. They get so many tourists up there. How awesome would it be to take a Nile River cruise all the way from here up to Cairo? That would be amazing. The kind of stuff you could see. All right. So here's where, let's take the centering off. We left from up here at Dara. And look at that. There's their other big runway. And the... Oh, you really can't. Well, you kind of can. So these are the bunkers they have down here. If I could take this off, which I can't because we took off from there, you would see that they do have little hangars in here. And then up here by their tiny little parking area, they've got some that have been dismantled. So you can see they took all the dirt off and they just have the front of it standing there now. So I'm guessing this was probably military, but 2 huge runways for... Look at that thing. Well, that's cool. What do you think's inside of that? Something important and secret. Well, they got a few more spots up here too. It must have been military. All right, up here is where the temple of Kom Ombo is, Ombo, and here's the town of Kom Ombo up here, and then here's the town of Dara on this side. So here's where, and that looked just like that, and it looked like it even had relief, and I don't know how they pulled that off, but this really looked like that in the sim. And then there's the Crocodile Museum. Very cool. And the camel market is, here it is, it's down here. There it is. On the Google map, you can see all the camels roaming around everywhere. Biggest one in Egypt. So if you're looking for a camel, you better be ready to do some haggling, though, with these guys. All right, so there's the Nile. You know what that is. We talked about that a little bit. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Oh, look at this place. Look how built up. So this is New Aswan City now. Look how built up that is. And they got all these big high-rise residential, I'm guessing, places now. But all that was in the sim is all this low stuff here. They did even build that up a little bit, too. That was completely blank in the sim. And here's their water park. Look at that. If that would have been in the sim, I bet we could have spotted that, especially that big wave pool. And there's your little high school or whatever that is. Okay, so we came around this way, and then here's where those SAM sites are. And look, they're even labeled in a little NavMap. So that really looked just like that. And then let's get that out of there. The other one was over here. These were a lot wider. They must have had a sandstorm come through. Man, and you can even see the missiles a little bit. How cool is that? All right, so we came over here, and this is the tombs that I couldn't show you until we got out of the plane, and even then we just got a very short look at them. But here's where those 2 guys were buried. And in here, this is called the, I think, the Tombs of the Nobles. So they just had some wealthy upper-class folks that wanted to be buried between those guys, I suppose. But they said they have some pretty nice artwork and stuff still in the walls in there. So if you're taking your Nile River cruise, come on down through there. And there's the monastery. That also looked unbelievably good in the sim. For some reason, really good. And even this thing did too. The tomb of the guy that died in the 50s. That place is pretty opulent. All right, I didn't get to mention it because we were just going through so fast, but this is called Elephantine, this island here. And this was a major trading stop for the ivory trade, which I think is why they called it that. But then some people said, no, they called it that because this kind of looks like an elephant tusk here. But they've excavated this whole southern end of the island, and it looks pretty gray, and it's hard to see in the sim, so even if I did point it out, there's not much to see. But they've even got a pyramid here. They had a bunch of fortresses, some temples, the gateway of Amenhotep II, and he was a bigwig, so maybe he was coming down here to visit a little bit. But that's pretty cool. That must have been a real happening place back in the day, collecting all those tolls. All right, here's the Nubian Museum, which I did not point out because it didn't look like that in the sim, but that's, I think, where most of the cool stuff probably is around here. And then here is our unfinished obelisk. Look at that thing. Really looked just like that in the sim. It may have even been more defined in the sim. And they said they have a few other things that they never fully chipped out. Maybe they broke or were, fractured or something was imperfect about them, so they left them in there, which would be a neat little place to tour. And they got a lot of big granite quarries around here, which I think was a big part of this place's upstart. Look at all this stuff here. Those are all quarries down there. And then we came down here to where we saw the Nile Museum, which is probably not all there. Look at this thing. What do you think that is? There was nothing on there in the Google map, no marker of any kind. And it looks like they built something on the top of it. And I'm kind of wondering if that was just fill dirt that they've been just moving out here for some reason. At first I was like, oh, it's an old step pyramid. But I'm wondering if it's not. It might just be fill dirt that they're piling up for some reason. And then here's the Roman amphitheater. Check that out. Awesome. All right, so here's the low dam. And once you get really close, you can see all these details on it. It really looks fantastic if you want to do a flyby and check that out. But that was the largest masonry dam in the world when they finished that in 1902. And they also built that for flood control, but they had to keep building it up higher and higher because it kept spilling over the top of it, which is why they eventually built this big one down here. All right, so here's the temple that they had to move, the Temple of Philae, which was originally out here. And on the Google map, you can see this is kind of a ring shape. So I don't know if the water level is a little bit higher or not, but that's where it originally was. And this place out here is Biga Island, and they have some ruins out here, which you can kind of see in the sim if you fly close enough. Not much relief to them, but you can kind of see those there. And then here's where that old fort was, which wasn't all that impressive, but that's where it was. And then we saw the big dam down here. Oh, and there's Aswan University. We couldn't see that because we were looking at the dam. You could have seen it if you looked off to the right. Check that thing out. I think they crank out about 2 gigawatts. They got 12 turbines in there. And I kept seeing cataracts of the Nile. They called a couple different spots the cataracts of the Nile. I was like, what the heck is that? And it's just areas where they have white water. So either from here, from the spillway, or if it's running over a really shallow area and it gets a little bit rapidy, they call it the cataracts. All right, check this thing out. This is that huge monument. Look at that. You can see this thing, whatever that is, if it's another SAM missile site, which it might be, kind of looks like it. Look at the size of that. And it was just a big rectangle in the sim. Not even close to that. But there's no way that's 2,000 feet high. They probably meant to say feet. 600 feet seems a little bit more like it. But they got a big observation deck up in there, and I think they built that in 89, and I think it was made to kind of get a look at the dam here, which you probably definitely could. And then here's where that other temple was. This is one the Romans built, which also had to be moved before they flooded this part of it. But that's the one that was dedicated to one of the sun gods. Very nice of the Romans to do that. And then we came on in for our final to the airport. So if you could see it, let me just see if it'll let us turn this off. I don't think it's going to. Nope. So this one here has X's all over it in real life. And there are runway markings here. It says 36R right here on this one. And it's got skid marks all the way down it. But it also has the striped lines like it's a taxiway. So again, I don't know what's going on with that. But it doesn't matter because we got down. And that's it. That's the unfinished obelisk and Aswan. Awesome flight. Had an absolute blast. Learned so much stuff. Thank you so much to our member who recommended this. Great, great flight. Can't wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.